All right, so back with a different kind of power rankings. And before you skip to your team, let me explain how this works, because I know some people are just going to skip ahead and then be very confused and complain about it because they don't understand how this works. So the way that this whole system is built is that basically this is kind of using math and using an algorithm as opposed to using just opinions, because that can be very wonky and no one has time to spend 20 hours a week on every single team. There's just not enough hours in the week. So let me first differentiate what is my opinion and what isn't my opinion. And my opinion even isn't really exactly an opinion. It's based on data, which is basically what I do is I created a video a while back called Everyone is Wrong About Positional Value. And that was where I basically found out how valuable being good at each position is. I grouped these into certain categories, tier 1 through 5, and assigned a win total to those. So for example, a quarterback is worth 4.09 wins if he's a tier 1 quarterback and 0 wins if he's a tier 5 quarterback. So then what I've been doing this season is that every week I simply just want to figure out, okay, where is each team in each positional category, and then how much wins do you deserve? Now, I could just use my opinion, but I find it more interesting if I kind of take myself out of that part of the equation. So instead, I use Pro Football Focus's grades. So there will be some moments when I don't fully agree with where PFF has certain things, and when that comes up, I will say it. I'm still going to give my opinion on each team and kind of how I feel about them as I go through this algorithm, and I think that makes it far more interesting. So again, one notable issue with this algorithm, and just because something has a flaw or two in it does not mean that you shouldn't look at it. It just means you should be aware of those flaws, if you even want to call it a flaw. Because one of the flaws is it's not predictive, and that's intentional. That's by design. It's not intended to be a predictive model. It doesn't account for injuries. So don't look at it as these will be the teams that win the Super Bowl. Look at it as a great way to measure who has or hasn't been underperforming or overperforming. All right. Without further ado, let's get into the rankings of it all. This will be probably my intro just for all of these now, because I've set it up a little bit better than I have in the past. So I'm just going to use this and maybe add on to it if there's more confusion. And again, any questions, tweet at me at Jackson Kruger. If you're confused, I will be happy to help you guys out and just understand it a little better. All right, so first 8 here. There's a new thing that we have to talk about on this. Also, I should mention right here, yes, I'm not doing it live. It's just a little bit more difficult to do it live, do a one-man show like that. I wanted to do it live once, but it seemed like instead of that being less confusing, it just created more confusion. So we're going to do the pre-recorded stuff, which just makes it easier for me anyways. But yeah, additional categories. So all the way to the right, what you see is WE. That stands for wins earned. So basically, for example, the Arizona Cardinals, who are the number 1 ranked team here, they, over a 17-game season, would earn 14.41 wins. Well, if you average that out to the 7 games they've played, that means they've earned 5.9 of their overall 7 wins. So they've overperformed a bit by about 1.1 win. I figured that could be a cool sort of way to, help just make this kind of, this chart a little bit more easy to understand. And you look at what the Cardinals have done well across the board, it still has been, it's been their, quarterback play, obviously, Kyler Murray, MVP candidate. It's been their wide receiving play, which has been great. Also worth noting, wide receivers and tight ends are all included. They added Zach Ertz, who had some good plays, also, led to an interception, but that's besides the point a little. For the, defense, their defense has been perfect across the board now, which the run defense has had its ups and downs. Well, last week it shot up. It was, I believe, a tier 5 or even at best a tier 4. Well, it's gotten a lot better, especially this last week against Houston. Houston got basically nothing going when they tried to run the football, so that obviously helped the Arizona Cardinals out a lot. So they've improved since then. I figured they'd probably end up at the number 1 seed at some point. This is where they are. A little bit of overperforming, but again, overperforming isn't necessarily a bad thing. Part of overperforming will just simply be because, there might be some flaws in the algorithm, or even just like, listen, not every tier 1 quarterback is the same. This is what an average tier 1 quarterback generates. So you could argue if Kyler's an MVP candidate, maybe he deserves a little bit more, and that's the reason for the overperformance. You could also argue, given the coaching staff and how well they've done so far, that's part of the overperformance. There's some luck in there as well, right? Like the Vikings missing that field goal, that helps. But as a whole, this, that's kind of how overperformance or underperformance could happen. It's mostly those three things. There being slight differences in the actual grades themselves. A team has been coaching well and has outcoached their talent one way or the other, or a team has gotten lucky or unlucky. That's how you'll see differences there. So moving down to the Raiders now. Raiders 5-2 in the record book, but they're just second team according to this. And the way their team is built is really like the ideal way to build a team, in my opinion. I mean, you'd like to get that offensive line better, right? The offensive line's been the worst in football, according to PFF. But Carr's been playing great. The receiving core is, shockingly been better than I expected. And part of that is just having a lot of different guys who can come in and play their roles, right? It's not always about having that elite guy, although that helps. But having Henry Ruggs, having Darren Waller, having Brian Edwards, having Hunter Renfrow, just having guys who can play, that really helps them a lot. And then their defense has been awesome. Their coverage has been awesome. Their pass rush has been awesome. Their run defense has gotten the job done. So I'm kind of right with, PFF right here. And I think that, they're probably better than what their record would say of 5-2. Number 3, the Dallas Cowboys were also important thing to keep in mind with this new wins added category, which I'm having a lot of fun with. It's a little bit different because not every team has played the same amount of games. So for, Arizona, it's 5.9 out of their 7 games. For Dallas, it's 4.5 out of their 6 games because they have had a bye week. Dallas has been good as well, though. I mean, 4.5, they're 5-1, so maybe a bit overperforming, but not by much. I mean, their offensive line is awesome, their quarterback play is awesome, their wide receiving play is awesome, and their run offense has actually dropped in the bye week. Other teams have surpassed them, so that kind of is part of why they've dropped in the rankings a little bit, but they can still improve. Dallas looking like a legit contender, and I do agree with that. Number 4, we have the Cleveland Browns right here. So, Browns a little bit of underperforming, right? Because they're 5-1 here, or 5.1 is the total wins they've earned, but they're only 4-3. You look across the board, I mean, the tier 4 quarterback play just has to improve if this team is going to be a legit contender, but they've done a lot else really well. Tier 1 offensive line play, tier 3 wide receiver play. Should mention, if you're confused, what these numbers are think about it as these are the wins added for each position grouping. That's what these numbers are. Anyways, for Cleveland, a 2.5 win running game, because that's what you get for tier 1, and a lot of good stuff on their defense as well. I think their defense has played well. I think it's a good team. I do. I think that the Browns are good. Next up, Tampa Bay, who is still getting credit for a tier 4 coverage unit, which is kind of surprising. But, awesome offense as a whole, and only tier 2 wide receiving play. That's another surprise. So maybe, flip those around. It gets a little bit more even. But for Tampa Bay, they've gotten credit for, according to this, they've overperformed their win shares. What's the reason for that? I don't know. But again, it's not a massive overperformance. 0.9 wins. I mean, you expect this kind of to vary. There could be some variance from 1 to 2 wins towards the end of the season. So even being a full win at this point, about halfway through, that's not crazy to think about. Number 6, yes, how about your Minnesota Vikings here at 6? So the Vikings are definitely a team that I think I'm probably higher on than a lot of people. Again, the difference between how good they are versus how talented they are, or like what their record is versus like what this says, is a bit high. I mean, again, they're only 3-3, but this says they should be 4-2. So that changes stuff. But again, like I talked about with the Cardinals, I mean, if that kick goes in for the Vikings, well, now, they're basically right at what this says, and the Cardinals are basically right at what this says. That's not exactly how this works, but that kind of goes to show, okay, there's some accuracy here when it takes out sort of the luck factor a little. For Minnesota, another team with a tier 5 offensive line in this top panel, but you also have, tier 1 quarterback play, you have good wide receiver play, and their defense has shockingly, graded very well for Pro Football Focus's, but I don't totally disagree. I mean, I thought they played well against Carolina. They really shut that team down. They played well against Detroit. Granted, it's Detroit, but still, they played well against Cleveland. They played well against Seattle, so they've had some really good performances, and even the ones where, they didn't look fantastic were against Cincinnati and Arizona, who both have pretty good offenses, so that makes sense. Number 7, we have the Los Angeles Rams right here, so I think some people would have them higher. I don't hate this whatsoever, though. I think that Rams here at 7 feels about right to me. Again, it's that the Matthew Stafford of it all. I do think there has been a difference between people who have really watched and evaluated his game so far versus people who just sort of, read the box score, right? Although, is that difference tier 3 quarterback play? I've always felt Matt Stafford's a tier 2 quarterback, and if you give him that extra, win on the season, that's going to make the record look a lot closer. They're another team that's outperformed by over a win. They're one of the most outperforming teams right here because they only have earned 4.7 wins, but they have 6 on their record. Is this luck? I don't know. Is it good coaching? It's probably good coaching, which again, that translates week to week. So if it's just good coaching, that's fine. And again, you expect some sort of variance. So I think that's fine. And also, one other aspect that can result in a difference is just schedule. I don't know if that's the case with Los Angeles, but that is another aspect that should be mentioned. And also, how about number here at 8, the number 8 team, the New England Patriots, which are such an interesting team because they've consistently done well on these power rankings, whereas they are only 3 and 4, although they did just put up 50 against the Jets. It's interesting because you look at all the teams that have kind of surprised me consistently, they've ended up being more right than I would have guessed. I think about teams like Dallas, teams like Cincinnati, teams like the Raiders, teams like, I guess you could argue even the Vikings have, looked better and sort of outperformed their record in terms of this chart and have eventually caught up to that. So we haven't seen that with every team just yet, but maybe the Patriots are that team. Maybe they are a legit good team that's just been underperforming so far. But again, could that be partially coaching? Maybe, I don't know. Could that be luck? Probably. They should have another win. They should have beaten the Dolphins. They got, they were the better team in that one. So they've been underperforming by a win, 1.7 wins. You expect that to turn around to some degree. All right, next tier. So we have the Tennessee Titans here who, listen, they're coming off a game where they just blew out the Chiefs and they beat the Bills, who many people think are, a great team as well. So that's kind of interesting, although they're still not too much higher than maybe you would expect. To me, the biggest surprise for the Titans is a tier 1 coverage unit. Listen, they were awesome against the Chiefs. I studied that game. They were really good against the Chiefs. Their coverage unit has been solid. Still have reservations about the rest of that defense, but if you can cover, the rest of the defense will come. You give time, pass rush will get there. That's what the numbers say. I think a big aspect of why the Titans are lower is simply just the Derrick Henry not being tier 1, which even if he's not playing like a tier 1 running back, a lot of that is just because they're stacking the box and stopping him immediately, and that's setting stuff up. That's still giving you the tier 1 value, so that's kind of where there could be a little shift in this. So I would say that they're actually should be a bit higher, I would put them at. If they did have that tier 1 status, they would be number 3 in the power rankings. So that's probably where I would have them. Wide receiver feels fine. Everything else feels fine. Number 10, you have the Green Bay Packers, who, again, a team that some people might have higher, but I think they're still a very good team. Have they overperformed a little bit? I think so. At 4.6 wins, their record is currently 6-1, but they're still really good. And a big aspect of why they're probably better than only 4.6 wins earned, if you stretch that out for 17 games, is going to be the quarterback play. A lot of people have been wondering why PFF has been lower on the Packers. I think a part of the Packers' passing attack, and Aaron Rodgers in particular, I think a big aspect of why they're lower. Again, it still was that first game, and he hasn't had a ton to do, although it's still a bit surprising. I think he's at least done enough to be tier 2. Wide receiving core playing outstanding, although without Devontae Adams in the Thursday night game, how much will that be hindered. But as a whole, very good team, 11-win team. That's very good. Number 11, your Cincinnati Bengals, who, again, 11 feels low, right? But then you look at the win total projection, and that's 11 wins as well. So that kind of feels high. So it's almost like, okay, well, you're kind of getting both sides of the coin there. And listen, they've pretty much earned what they got. 5-2, they've earned 4.5 wins. So, I mean, you can't end with 4.5. I guess you can with a tie, which they almost tied. So that's actually kind of perfect. Although, actually, now that I just remembered, they lost that game. So that would go the other way. But besides the point, listen, Cincinnati's played very well. Joe Burrow is in a tier 2 quarterback status as a second-year player. That's awesome. And, again, the Jamar Chase of it all has really impacted this team. And this is a team that has, at times, been a tier 1 running game. So if they can get back to that level, that would really take off. But for now, they have not been that, according to PFF. Defense played really well. Coverage and run defense playing spectacular. So when you got those stuff going together, that's a good football team. Again, don't be distracted by the number 11 because there's a lot of good teams left. Be more impressed with the 11 wins, which is very good. Number 12, you have the Buffalo Bills, which I think a lot of people every week, they've been one of the teams that's been consistently underperforming. And I say this every week. I think PFF is just too low on certain aspects of the Bills. I think the Bills' offensive line is better. I think Josh Allen is clearly, I think he's performed better than a tier 3 quarterback. Not just, obviously he is better than a tier 3 quarterback. I think the wide receiving core is a little better. That being said, still, they've earned 3.4 wins according to this. They're 4-2, so it's not that far different, but I'd probably have them a bit higher. Next up, number 13, the Baltimore Ravens, who are at 9.99 wins projected for 17 games. They're at 4.1 wins earned through 7 games. Tough loss to Cincinnati. Lamar Jackson, I think, was getting credit for tier 1. They've had him fall all the way back to tier 3. And again, the surprising thing still is the running game not being tier 1, which again, people get mad at me for. I don't do that. I don't take care of this stuff. That's all PFF where each team ranks. But as a whole, there's a lot of good for the Ravens, and I think that, you got to give them 2 extra wins, whether that's with Lamar being tier 1 or whether that's with the running game being tier 1 and Lamar being a tier 3 passer. Either way, you got to give them an extra 2 wins there. So Ravens are better than 9.99, I think, but you could disagree. Pro Football Focus does. Number 14, you have the Chargers, who did not play last week, so that's an aspect. They're 4-2, only 3.4 wins earned, so a little bit overperforming, but not massively. And I think you can just chalk that up to coaching, which will be there for the rest of the year. Herbert falling down to tier 2 status. That was already the case last week. So obviously we know nothing new about the Chargers, but that's where they're at. Number 15, the New Orleans Saints, still one of the weirder teams because, again, they blew out the Packers and then got blown out by the Panthers, which kind of confused everybody for the first 2 weeks, and we all thought different things were the case. But no, the Saints are mediocre. I think that's fair. They've earned 3.1 wins, and they have currently 4 wins, so, overperforming a little bit, and this is in a 6-game season so far. Alvin Kamara means so much to this team, and we saw that in that Monday night game. He is this offense, and he goes, when the team goes, he goes, or I guess other way around. When he goes, the team goes. So he's doing very well. Defense kind of okay. This feels right for me. Number 16, we have the Denver Broncos right here. Again, this one feels about right, given their 7-game sample size of 3.5 wins, and they currently have 3 wins. So this is kind of where they've been at. They've been mediocre, right? There's stuff across the board that's been fine, but there's not a lot of great here with the Denver Broncos. Best part about their team, probably the receiving core, but, been a very big disappointment, and a lot of where they have some good stuff, like the quarterback play, that's a lot of carried over from those first 3 weeks. All right, next 8 here. So Philadelphia Eagles are the next team. They've earned 3.5 wins, which is, better. They're underperforming, right? Because they're only 2-5. So that's interesting. I think a big aspect of this is, the Jalen Hurts of it all as a tier 3 quarterback. It's true, but one of the things that kind of concerns me a little bit is how dependent he is on other teams playing man coverage. When they don't, he just doesn't seem to play as well. That's been a very real thing. When teams just drop 7 and kind of just play their coverage, that's kind of where he struggled. Does a lot better against the blitz, but once that gets out, it could be concerning. Offensive lines played well, and they get some other points across the board. Number 18, the Falcons are right on the money. They've earned 3 wins. They've won 3 games. So there you go. Matt Ryan has gotten to tier 2 quarterback status quietly. I think we all were like, okay, Matt Ryan's washed up after a couple of weeks, and then he just played really good football since then. So good for him. Matt Ryan's back. Kyle Pitts helping out that receiving core a ton. What he's done as a rookie is absurd. Not a great Falcons team, but not a bad one either. Now let's move on to the 49ers here at number 19. Just kind of a weird team, right? I mean, offensive lines played well. Receiving core has been all right, but it's been very streaky. It'll have a good week and then a bad week, which is kind of the frustrating thing about them. Defense has played solid. Defense has played well, I would say. You'll take the, over 3 wins for a defense, but the offense has just been very disappointing. It kind of all starts with tier 5 quarterback play. Tough to win. They also have underperformed a bit. Part of that might be schedule because, they're a 2.8 wins earned team who's only won 2 games. Number 20, you have the Seattle Seahawks who, are at 3.2 wins earned despite being 2-5. Although part of this is kind of you still have the Russell Wilson carryover of a tier 2 quarterback play, but clearly with Geno Smith, it's no longer the case. So the rest of the team's not great. They were Wilson dependent. Even the receiving core has been banged up this season. So the Seahawks are just one of those teams. You kind of you don't learn a lot from them being included in this, unfortunately. Number 21, how about the Kansas City Chiefs this far down? And what's so funny about this is another team people kept saying, oh, Chiefs are way too low. Chiefs should be higher. Chiefs should be higher. No one's saying they should be higher. Maybe people still are, but they're right around what they're projected at. They have earned 3.1 wins. They've won 3 games. So this is who the Chiefs are. The Chiefs haven't really gotten lucky or unlucky in terms of this. Now, I still think that there's some things that'll turn around. I think Mahomes will start playing better. I do. I don't think he'll be a tier 3 quarterback the rest of the season. They have a tier 1 offensive line, even though, again, offensive line always gets all the criticism. But no, the offensive line's been good, and that checks out to me. A big chunk of why it looks worse is Mahomes is quick to bail. But again, he's quick to bail because he can make stuff happen, so it works both ways. Coverage unit has had its moments, according to PFF. I don't know, but that's what they say. And wide receiving core only being tier 3, that checks out. It needs to be better. There's no excuse for that. So Chiefs, get it together. Number 22, you have the Indianapolis Colts, who, they're here at 6.5 wins projected for 16 games. So that seems on the low side, but they've started to perform a lot better. And the biggest thing I think is they're getting healthier, right? The offensive line getting healthier, that's huge because we expected that to be at least a tier 2 offensive line. There's another win added in there if you can stretch that out. Quarterback play's been solid. The Carson Wentz being a tier 3 quarterback, I think that's a win. I think you would take that for sure. And there's some stuff across the board. Maybe you were hoping for a little bit better stuff, in terms of their run defense or especially their coverage, but even that started to improve. The Colts are 3-4. They've earned 2.7 of those wins, but again, as they continue to get healthier, can they start racking up more wins? I think it's certainly possible. Number 23, you have the Pittsburgh Steelers, who at 3-3 probably should be 2-4 according to this, which checks out. But still, there's some value. Hey, Big Ben, you're now no longer a tier 5 quarterback, tier 4. You'll take that as a win. The issue is still, wide receiving game not been spectacular. That's kind of been a big issue for the Steelers. Number 24, the Miami Dolphins, who continue on their tailspin. Although, according to this, they have actually underperformed, which I think is right. They're 1-6. They probably should be, 2-5, which isn't much better, but at least it's a little better. Also, you look at what the Dolphins are good at. Amazingly, what they're best at right now is quarterback play, which is hilarious because that was what we all were concerned about heading into this season. Tua's not been the problem. You could argue he's not the solution, but he hasn't been the problem. Brissett wasn't even awful when he came in, although he wasn't great either. Tua is not the issue here. The issue is the awful offensive line, the wide receiving room, which, listen, Waddle's shown flashes flashes, but like this has not been a great wide receiving room for sure. And their defense has just been nowhere near as dominant as it was last year. So on pace for only 5 wins at this point. Maybe that might be optimistic. I don't know. All right, final panel here. A lot of teams, like I look at all these teams, like, yeah, these teams all suck. Like there isn't a single one here where I'm like, oh no, this team is actually like interesting to me. I guess maybe like, I don't know, maybe the Giants, but not really. Like I think these teams all suck. We start off with the balls. That is the Washington football team, of course. Another team right on the money. 2 wins earned. They are 2-5 right now. So there you go. Offensive lines played well. Run defense and pass rush has been awesome, but like you just don't win games in the NFL with line play. You could argue they have the best front 7 and offensive line combo in football. You could really make that argument, and you're 2-5 because you need to do the other stuff. You need better quarterback play. You need better receiving play. It's kind of just Terry McLaurin trying to carry the team on his back in a lot of these games. So that's been a big issue, and of course the coverage we already know has been awful. Also, when I say front 7, I'm specifically referring to how the front 7 stops the run, not linebackers as a whole, because obviously they don't cover well. Number 26, you have the Chicago Bears here, who have won 3 games, but I think we all know are not that good. They have overperformed to a pretty significant margin. Like the fact that they beat Cincinnati is still one of the more like mind-blowing things. And the Raiders, like they've beaten like good teams. They've also had 2 of the worst losses of the season against Cleveland and against Tampa Bay, so that's not spectacular. Bears aren't great. Like they're running the ball well. That's the one interesting thing about them is Khalil Herbert has brought them into tier 1 running back room range. So if that falls apart, they're going to be a lot lower, which is not great. But so far, they are a team that's massively overperformed, and they're still not great. But also massively overperforming is winning 1.2 games more than they should have so far. Number 27, you have the Carolina Panthers here. So Panthers, what a fall from grace they've had, man. It's been 4 weeks of just bad stuff all the way across the board. They've, at this point, they've only earned 1.8 wins. Despite that, they have 3 wins. So that's what that's what you're optimistic about is, hey, you've still won 3 games. But this team has looked so bad these past 4 weeks. I mean, they can't do anything on offense, it seems. So got to figure that out for sure. Defense still has pieces. I like their defense, but offense just bad. Number 28, the New York Giants, who are 2-5. They've earned 1.8 wins. Daniel Jones has been solid. That's it. Like that's the good thing about this team. Thought their defense looked better last week, but still, a long way to go for this Giants team. And the receiving core getting banged up, not helping anybody. Number 29, you have the Jacksonville Jaguars, who again, their running game, that's the biggest part of their offense right here. They're coming off a bye week, so that's why you see them with tied for the lowest wins earned in this scenario at 1.3, but they've only played 6 games. The other teams below them have played 7, so a little bit higher there. Offensive line's had a little bit of stuff going, not a lot. All tier 4 or 5 across the board except for their running back room. Number 30, you have the Detroit Lions. Listen, okay, offensive line's been pretty good actually. Quarterback play, Jared Goff isn't the worst in the world. Not much else. Wide receiving room hasn't even been tier 5, but it's been tier 4. And then the next 4 categories, all tier 5 or 4. I'm not sure about running game, but it doesn't matter. Tier 4 and 5 both gets you 0 wins. Hey, they've been kicking all right. Should have mentioned the kicking is, if you're this late into it, you've probably already written your comment, but kicking is just based on kicking percentages. But yeah, anyways, number 31, you have the Houston Texans, who have gotten some decent quarterback play, mostly still from like Tyrod Taylor early on. That's been most of it. And then that's pretty much all they got. They don't got much else going. And then finally the Jets, who have a good offensive line. Again, that's what people criticize. People think the Jets should draft tackles in this draft class, which, listen, I haven't studied the draft class, but like they desperately need receiving help to make this team go. Zach Wilson also hasn't been great in this rookie season on top of it, so that doesn't help. And now you have Mike White, which doesn't help even more. So this is a tough situation for the Jets here at 32. They have the least amount of projected wins at just 3. So yeah, that's the power rankings. I hope you guys enjoyed this. They're fun to make, sometimes a bit difficult to make. Definitely takes some time, more of a lengthy process, and not my most viewed videos either. But I don't make these because of the views. I make them just because I find them interesting. So I hope you do too. Hope you guys enjoyed this, and of course, as always, thanks for watching.